It's Tuesday at the Breakfast Club. Steve here. How's everybody doing?
Oh, absolutely brilliant, Steve. Absolutely fan-bloody-tastic. Oh, you couldn't ask for anything more today. I mean, I've just listened to New Order's new album. I've seen United win. Heady days. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, it couldn't possibly get any worse. Take your time, Steve.
Well, Peach is setting the topic of conversation around here for the next couple of weeks, which I think is awesome because I think Peach should have been the one in charge all along. Hi, Peach.
Yeah. Good one, Steve. Good one. Who's Peach? Do you mean Princess Peach?
I sow discord among my fellow Breakfast Clubbers.
It's intersectional atheism! Run away!
Peach made an excellent video this week about cultural appropriation, which she's talked about on this channel before. It was actually really, really informative to me. I really enjoyed watching it. I learned some things that I didn't like. I honestly, I show my ignorance, but I had no idea that Michael Jackson ripped off the moonwalk.
Actually, he didn't rip it off. He saw the move, contacted the person who was doing it in 1979 to about 1982, and he said, "Hey, can you teach me that move?" And he was taught the move by the person who did it. Actually, second, there was a guy who did it in like the 40s or 50s, even before him, but he didn't rip it off. He popularized it, but he didn't rip it off. Neither did he invent it, and that's not cultural appropriation because actually those other guys who did it were also African American, so I don't understand what Michael Jackson's got to do with cultural appropriation. Besides, that guy could do absolutely anything he pleased and it would have been absolutely brilliant. But that's not why you're talking about cultural appropriation, Steve, is it?
That's like that. I learned something.
Well done. Do you want a cookie, Steve?
Something that I'm now embarrassed that I didn't know before. But appropriation, cultural appropriation, is one of those topics that I don't really have a great deal of personal investment in it because I'm a white dude and I've never felt underprivileged.
So why are you even doing a video on it in the first place, Steve? And besides, for a second there, I thought you were going to say I'm a white dude and I don't have any culture to speak of. I mean, so what? You yourself do not feel underprivileged. Doesn't mean the whole concept doesn't even exist.
In terms of my race at all, so I don't know what it feels like to come from a culture where distinctive portions of that culture are appropriated by people from another culture, from a more dominant culture.
Oh, Steve, you are a white American. Your cultures have been appropriated all around the world, be it forced or unforced. Steve, you are so unaware of your own history. Hell, even my own culture was appropriated by yours. That's why we had a war, wasn't it? Even though it was either over taxes and shit, but that's besides the point. Your culture is based on mine. So, yeah, how does it feel to have the whole world Americanized and taking parts of your culture and making them their own? Apparently, you've not ever felt underprivileged and appropriated. Besides, I don't believe in this bullshit anyway. I was just using that to see, to try and get you to see that it happens to everyone. And it's actually a good thing. Just saying, cultures evolve and adapt things all the time. That is why human civilization has lasted so long to 7 billion people.
I have people that I greatly respect who are saying contradicting things about this.
Oh, what's the matter, Steve? What's the matter? Is social justice confusing you? Is intersectional atheism got too many double standards and contradictory statements coming back and forth between the people that you associate with? What's the matter? Is the hook box getting too much? Do you want a new one, Steve?
I completely hear what Peach says in her video, but I also think of one of my favorite jokes from Paul Mooney, who is a brilliant stand-up comic, if you don't know who that is. But Paul Mooney had a joke in his stand-up that he used to do where if the audience really laughed at something he said, he would say, "Don't laugh too hard, because if the white people find out that you like me too much, they'll come and take me away." And there's sort of a sense of painful truth when he says that. The idea that, you know, that so many things about, specifically in the United States, specifically black culture, that are sort of lifted and taken away or appropriated by white culture and made their own.
No, Schteve. No. No, 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 Schteve. No. No, Schteve. Schteve. No. That is not what he's talking about. I've never even heard this joke. I know exactly what the guy's on about. He's on about getting arrested, Schteve. He's not on about his culture being appropriated. I think Paul Mooney would probably be like, "Man, what the fuck is up? What are you saying? What are you saying? I'm talking about the popo." I don't even know how this guy speaks, by the way. You know? Schteve! Jesus Christ! Not everything is being stolen. White culture does not steal from black culture. Both cultures have borrowed and influenced each other throughout the years and created such fine things as rock and roll, mixed race relationships, my cousin, etc. You know, without black and white people working together and influencing each other, the world would be a much worse place than it already is. So, no, Schteve, it's not stealing, because, you know, the African Americans technically appropriated the guitar, by the way. I mean, that was a European instrument brought over by immigrants from around Europe. It is descended off the lute, and I think the banjo was also something that they borrowed off Europeans as well. Or maybe both cultures created that, I don't know. Either way, both cultures are guilty, and there's nothing wrong with that because it created beautiful things. I mean, you know, hip-hop isn't the most culturally appropriating genre of all time. I mean, how many times have you seen Kraftwerk, not just James Brown and Kool and the Gang, be sampled by a hip-hop artist from the 80s and the 90s? Too many times. They're still being sampled to this day, in fact. I mean, hip-hop has borrowed from so many sources, white and black and Asian and everything, that how come they have never, ever, ever been accused of this? How come they've never been called out on this? Because, hey ho, it's those contradictory statements that you hear in your hook box, Schteve. That's why.
And, I mean, probably the most famous example of that in the last 50 or 60 years in the United States is Elvis.
Jesus Christ, Schteve, Elvis did not culturally appropriate. He grew up with that community. He literally lived next door to them. Even though there was segregation, he still managed to go and see black artists and hang out with black people, especially in the churches, and listen to their music on the radio. He probably didn't even know some of those artists were black until he saw them live. He did not appropriate their culture. He was pretty much a part of it in many ways. In fact, many black performers were influenced by Elvis. Or, if it weren't for them, they wouldn't have become even more popular than they already are. And indeed, many of them were quite saddened that he had died. It's only very recently, thanks to Public Enemy, the fake black nationalists. You know, I love Public Enemy, don't get me wrong. But some of their politics just do not work. People now think that he stole the black man's music and that he was a racist. And that's their fault. And even though they've, you know, admitted they were wrong, the damage is already done. People think he's just some racist who culturally appropriated black music, even though he loved it and always gave credit to the singers and songwriters, both white and black, who wrote his songs, with or without him. So you've got that wrong, Schteve. And besides, I've already made a video about this.
You know, Elvis was making music that he was inspired to make by black artists. Elvis makes the same kind of music that black artists had been making for years in relative anonymity. Certainly nothing like the level of fame Elvis attained. Elvis starts doing it and suddenly he's the biggest star ever. I can understand if I were a black person, how that and incidents like that would really bother me.
Very few people at the time complained or even hated Elvis for it. You see countless accounts of people being grateful for his coverage and, you know, wearing his influences on his sleeve and telling people to go out and buy their records. You know, Little Richard can attest for this. Chuck Berry can attest to this. You name it. Without him, we wouldn't even be talking about these black artists, would we? We wouldn't be talking about Little Richard. We'd only be talking about Pat Boone, wouldn't we? You know? So what if he did the same music as them? If it wasn't for Sun Records and his manager, who were masters of PR, bear in mind, this isn't his fault. This isn't because he stole their music. These black artists were still massively successful in their day. Don't forget the people that he covered. But in order to get true superstardom for this music, it had to be performed by a white person, because back in the day, people would have preferred a white person singing this song. That's not Elvis's fault. That's the society of which he lived in. And besides, nobody ever accuses people like Jerry Lee Lewis of culturally appropriating music. But he did country as well, so I guess, we can ignore him. Never mind, he was better than Elvis. But that's just my opinion, man. Besides, Elvis used to do a lot more than just black music. He could do country, he could do gospel, which is also sung by white people. Don't forget, it's religious music. He did a lot of spirituals, both white and black. He did pop music. He did all sorts. You can never really label Elvis as strictly a singer of African American music. The man did an awful lot in a 20-year career. So who knows what he could have done if he didn't die.
Would really get on my nerves and would make me feel like my people and my culture are just here to be exploited, or just here to be mined for the entertainment and the cultural edification of the white people.
Oh, Schteve, that is such bullshit. Don't try and think you can imagine what a black person thinks when he hears a white person do their music. He or she might even be a fan of that person. Besides, it's a little known fact, really, or at least an ignored fact, that a lot of black artists also had songs written by white people, because back in the 50s, literally spanning all the way to like the days of the music hall and the American version, which was if I can remember correctly, it was the vaudeville. Songs were written by songwriters for artists, regardless of their colour. Everyone had songs written for themselves. There were very few people who actually wrote their own material and sung it. You know, for every Cab Calloway and Chet Atkins, there was an Elvis and a Temptations who did not write their own material. Although Elvis did write a few songs of his own, mainly B-sides though. And again, Schteve, to get back on point, you do not know what these people think. They might think it's exploiting their culture. They might think it's enriching the culture. They might think it's enriching the world that another country or another person is inspired by either their work or somebody else who they know's work. Plus, not all African American culture is the same. Not all African Americans are even of African origin. Some of them are Jamaican. Some of them are from the Dominican Republic. Others aren't born in America, but were born overseas in, I don't know, take your pick, maybe Germany or Britain, or actually the continent of Africa, where they all have different styles of music and cultures, and probably do not have anything in common with actual Americans born and raised there. They probably don't listen to blues or hip hop. They might listen to something else. Besides, what about Jimi Hendrix? Was he not ripping off British hard rock?
So I kind of see both sides of it.
No, Schteve. No, you do not. You do not see both sides of it. You only see the poor, oppressed black person who hates seeing all his culture being appropriated by white people, even though he has also appropriated white people's culture. I mean, if he's wearing a plaid shirt, that's from Scotland in the 16th century. Is that not appropriating Scottish and British culture? Is it not? No, Steve, you only see one side of it.
I personally, I mean, when I see a white girl wearing dreadlocks, I'm not automatically filled with rage and fury. I don't respond to it viscerally like that.
Well, no, Steve, you wouldn't. Because that would mean that you are a raving sexist. Because you attacked a girl viciously, saying, "You do not deserve to wear that hair. That is culturally appropriating Spartan culture." Oh my gosh, Steve, you are a sexist. You just attacked a woman for what she wears. Oh, so sorry, milady.
So I'm kind of on the fence on this one. It's not so much that I'm on the fence.
Then what are you on? Just wondering, Steve. What are you on, eh? Hey, what are you on, Steve? What have you been smoking?
It's that I feel like I don't really have any standing. And I think that's something that a white guy like myself should be willing to say and should be willing to recognize, instead of just barreling through and weighing the options and picking a side and then just devoting myself fully to that side and going all in and saying appropriation is bullshit or appropriation is fine and you people should stop fucking complaining about it. Instead of doing either one of those, because I don't really feel strongly in either of those directions, I should recognize that I don't really have standing in this.
You see, Steve, a normal person would just be like, fuck this, I'm not interested in this subject. I had no standing in it because I find this boring, and all you people who complain about it, and all you people who are debating about it are wasting my time. I've got better things to do, like pay the bills. But no, you have to see it from a racial point of view because you believe in identity politics and intersectional atheism. So, this is all stemming from the fact that you're white and you don't really have an opinion on it. Just say you don't have an opinion on it and you'd rather talk about other things, Steve, and perhaps we might not view you as such a joke.
And what I should really do is listen to what other people are saying, to listen to what people who do have standing are saying.
You see, I would applaud you for not listening and believing, but I know what you mean by people who have standing. Basically people who aren't white, despite the fact there are a myriad of different cultures. Both black and white, you all have different opinions on appropriation. But no, you just mean people who aren't white, and you need to weigh up the options of what these people say to you. But because you're in social justice, most of them tend to be against cultural appropriation, so I can wager that you're probably going to end up signing on those who say, all cultures should stay with each other, we should, be separate but equal, segregation, safe spaces for life.
Anyway, those are my thoughts. Those are my non-committal quasi-thoughts on the subject of cultural appropriation. Thank you guys for watching. Shayra, you're up next.
Bye, Steve. Bye. Oh, God. Oh, well. That video's over. Anyway, this has been Charming Man 93. Like and share the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all laters.